Hey everybody, this is Kathy Clark. I'm joined by James Gorman, the CISO of Elastio. Thanks for joining me today, James.
Thanks for having me. It's great to talk to you.
Likewise. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the cybersecurity landscape. One thing that we see at Elastio is that there's this big risk involved with backups that people just aren't aware of, right? They capture the backups, kind of forget about them, assume they're going to be there as an insurance policy if they need to roll back a change or they have a cyber attack, right? So I wanted to get your perspective on some of the
It's
risks.
kind of even worse than that because people think they've had backup solved and they've had backup solved for the last 20 years. But what they really don't understand is in today's age, you can't just rely on a backup. They've even gone to snapshots, so you can't really rely on snapshots because it takes 72 days to 90 days for you to discover if you've been compromised. And how long do you usually store your backups for? 30 days, 60 days, not much longer. It costs too much, takes up too much disk space. And how do you ever restore from something that was 60 days old because that was the last time it was free of ransomware? So in today's environment, you have to have assurance that your backups are, number one, they're there. Number two, we're successfully done. And number three, they're free of any ransomware and you can restore them. So those four things, they're there, they're done successfully. You can successfully restore from them and they're free from ransomware. That's the critical four measures of a backup today, as opposed to previously it was just, let's get it on tape and let's get it out to the, get it back out onto the systems.
Yeah, the other thing we find is that they're just not recovery tested, right? So, all of a
Well,
sudden you're in a pressure cooker and, now you're trying to find out, hey, what's our last clean backup and will it restore?
and that's been going on for decades, essentially, because most people take the backups, but it's too pain and too time and too human resource intensive to actually restore from that backups. For example, if you need to go to the backup tape, it's going to take you, you got to pull them out of cold storage. You're probably on S3. In today's world, they're stored to S3. It's going to take hours to get them copied over. It's going to take hours to rebuild the database. It's going to take hours to rebuild the server. And then you're 10 hours into it, and then you find out that your backups didn't work. So it's very time intensive to restore from backups, so you don't do it, and then you can't test it because you've got a production going on 24/7, 365. So it's very hard to find out if your backups are restorable. So having a built-in restore test or a built-in environment where you can restore is critical to making sure that you have good backups in 2023.
Yeah. The other thing we hear a lot is, well, I've got all these security systems, right? We've got these tools in place. So I think there's this misconception that the ransomware is even getting into their backup, right? So can you talk a little bit about that, how that happens?
The issue with having all these security tools is they're tripwires. They're looking for evidence of compromise, or they're trying to see what's happened. So they're set up to look for something that's running in the background. Only rarely will you do a full disk scan where you're scanning your disks, once a day, twice a day. And if it happens before or after backups, do you know if you caught the thing before or after you did your backup? Did it get infected onto your system before or after you did your backup? But when you're using a cybersecurity tool, it's point in time and it's looking for index. Well, I'm trying to think of the acronym. It's the IOC, the indication of compromise. And what they're looking for is something that the bad guys know that they're looking for. So what they do is they put it on the system and they sleep it. They say, wake up in 3 months and then infect the system, or let me know that you're there and then check back in with me in 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 days or however long they think they need to let it rest before they get caught. So it's already embedded into the system before your tool will detect it. Your malware tool, your antivirus, your XDR, your MDR, whatever flavor of endpoint protection you're using, if they are able to get it on there, not trigger your XDR, and then go back to kick it off at a later date. It's kind of like, if you're going to do something, why do it while you're in the area? Do it 3 weeks later or 3 months later when you're free and clear.
Got it. And then when it detonates, you're just reintroducing it back into the environment, right? If you restore from that backup.
Exactly.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about how Elastio solves this problem because it's unique in the market, right? No one's doing this.
Yeah, what Elastio is doing, which I think is very cool, and what attracted me to Elastio is they're taking a backup centric view of it, but it's not really. It's a restoration centric view. So I want to make sure that I'm capturing backups. You know, the guys who founded Elastio, they've been doing this for, you know, they've been doing various forms of backup and application recovery for the last 25, 30 years. And what they realize in their method is, I want to make sure that what I have will work when I need to restore it, because that's their key differentiator. And then with the way the market is, how can I make sure that it's restorable if it has malware on it? So I pull it off. We pull it off, we scan it, and then we store it to make sure that it's free of malware and storable. And then when we bring it back, we can scan it again to make sure it's free of malware before we bring it back. They also have a recovery test bed, which allows me to recover in the cloud or in AWS alongside of my production, not in my production, but alongside of my production, to make sure that I can get my system back up and running without affecting my production. Completely separate, completely different track environment, however you want to say it, but exactly as I have it in my production.
Yeah. And that's the challenge, right? Like you can't scan in real time because you're going to crash all your systems, right? So you really do need to have that layer where
Right. Well, it's not necessarily you're going to crash the systems. You're going to cause them to be slow, and you're going to cause them to be focused on doing something other than what they're supposed to be doing. Right? They're supposed to be processing. So your payment processor, you're supposed to be processing transactions. You're serving web pages. You're supposed to be serving web pages. You're doing a database lookup. You're supposed to be doing database lookups. And if I'm double taxing it by scanning it at the same time, that's a big problem.
Yeah, makes sense.
I have to add more hardware, I have to add more resources, which in the end of the day costs me more money.
Yeah, and speaking of money, let's talk a little bit about the global deduplication and compression. So I think that's a huge component, right?
Yeah.
So people are making these decisions about retention period because it's expensive, right? And
Right.
like you said, the malware ransomware sitting on their system exceeding the period of the retention. So
Yep.
talk a little bit about how that happens.
One of the beautiful things about Elastio is we have customers who've actually saved money in their backups by using Elastio. They have long retentions because if you're a HIPAA company, you have to retain your data out to 7 years, and you have to retain all your log data for a year. And if you've ever had a system out there, you know you have multiple copies of the same thing, and then the deduplication allows you to shrink down that size of the storage, so you're not storing 7 years of data. You're only storing 1 year equivalent by the deduplications.
That's amazing, right? So yeah, I've heard some customers, within 90 days, the tool's paying for itself. So
Yeah.
spending less than they were before, and
Yes.
they're getting the added data protection.
And in Q3, when we roll out our S3 storage product, that's going to be even more critical for people, because we'll be able to shrink their S3 buckets down. And that's going to help not only with the storage costs, because S3 is pretty cheap, but it's really going to help in the restoration when you're pulling the data off the S3 to restore.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks for joining me today, James. This has been really informative, and I hope our customers have learned something here today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to talk anytime. And if our customers have problems, they want to talk to our CISO, we're happy to get me on the phone with them.
Great. Thanks, James.